Striking Flint is a cooperative game about the 1937 Sit-Down Strike in Flint, Michigan. Players control committees with divergent but overlapping interests, working together for better living and working conditions. The strike ultimately resulted in General Motors recognizing the UAW.
One of the things that really drew me to designing Striking Flint was the local connection. I grew up in the city of Flint, and the labor history is something that was really important to me and that I wanted to seek out in a game. And I felt that it was a game that I was uniquely positioned to make, having been from there. But as I started to work on the game, and especially as I started to talk to Annabelle and Mary about publishing it, it became clear how many of the themes of Striking Flint still resonate today. You know, this is a game about a strike where workers went in and occupied a building, and the CEO of the company employed a bunch of legal tricks, a bunch of violent police incursions, and a lot of financial pressure to try to get the workers out.
Each event card is taken from a real headline. The press was hostile. They uncritically accepted the framing of the company and the police, while marginalizing and distorting the voices and concerns of the workers, even going as far as to dismiss the strike as ultimately being the work of outside agitators.
And I'm also seeing these themes resonate with other forms of civil disobedience. The student protests happening right now. Students are going in, they're going into buildings, and university administrators are calling the police, who are using violent tactics to try to get students out, when the students aren't even really putting up much of a resistance. And that's something that mirrors what happened in Flint. It's actually worse today than it was in Flint because the striking workers fought back in the 30s. And I hope that people playing the game see the modern relevance and see what happened then accurately what's happening today. Because as I reviewed the newspapers and events of the day, I really saw that connection as well.
On your turn, you take an action, then accrue the listed amount of exhaustion cubes. Your marker will then move a number of spaces on the calendar equal to your exhaustion. By occupying factory complexes and overcoming events, you'll move the concessions marker back a space. The players win the game by getting all of their markers together past that concessions marker. So the first event we flip over makes the picket action, placing workers in the street, more difficult. To overcome it, we'll need to outnumber strike breakers in the streets with workers. It's always the committee whose marker is earliest on the calendar who takes a turn. When there's a tie, as is the case at the start of the game, the committee whose token is on top of the stack is the one that goes. The CIO then has the first turn, and they use their move action, coordinating with other committees to move their workers from the factory into those streets. When a committee advances to or past their matching space on the calendar, the factory activates via a die roll. Each space matching the roll activates unless there's a worker on it. So this is a worker placement game that flips the paradigm on its head, where placing a worker prevents actions from taking place, mirroring the nature of a sit-down strike. At the end of your turn, if at least 2 factory complexes have workers but no strike breakers, the concession marker moves. Thanks to some luck at setup, we're already one step closer to our goals. The socialists go next, using a resist action to remove an adjacent strike breaker. This brings it to 4 strike breakers to 2 workers in the streets. The rank and file do the same, making it 3-2. While the socialists only gain 1 exhaustion with this action, the rank and file don't quite have the same gusto for confrontation as socialists do, so they gain 2. Each committee has its strengths and weaknesses, and this will need to be balanced, especially because running out of exhaustion cubes will break the strike and lose you the game. The veterans and the Women's Emergency Brigade each take the picket action, gaining an extra exhaustion due to the current event. But this does at last outnumber the strike breakers, removing that event and moving the concessions another step closer. The next event we flip over prevents the use of resist actions from within the factories, so long as there are strike breakers in the street. And this one's going to be harder to remove. The socialists are up next, and use their powerful ability Rouse. Each other committee gets to take an action on Red's turn. Those committees will gain exhaustion as normal, but they won't be moving on the calendar until their own turns. Several of them plan to use their turns to rest, removing exhaustion to the supply, So this is an opportune moment for the socialists to use this powerful action. The socialists move on the calendar and trigger another factory action. A 1 is rolled, but because all the 1s are occupied by our workers, nothing happens. We're doing it.
And so I'm really glad to see this game come out at this point in time. First, because I like honoring the history of where I grew up, and second, because a lot of these themes are still relevant. And I hope that people playing the game kind of see those parallels and think about them kind of both while they're playing and afterwards.